Let us pray. Dear God, you were with Joseph through bad times and good times. Through Joseph, you were able to accomplish many good things. Joseph realized that. This understanding helped Joseph reconcile with his brothers. Help us to grow in our understanding of your work in our lives and the lives of others. Amen. Hi, friends. Welcome to our second lesson on Joseph. Back when we were studying about Moses, a big part of his story was how he managed to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Did it ever make you wonder how they ended up in Egypt in the first place? Kind of wondered that. Well, right now we're learning about how the Israelites ended up being settled in Goshen and in Egypt. Ultimately, they became slaves. But it starts out with Joseph being carried off by traders to be auctioned off as a slave in Egypt. So let's see where our story picks up. These stories are adapted from the Children's Bible in 365 stories. When the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, they took Joseph to the slave market, where he was put up for sale. A man called Potiphar bought Joseph. Potiphar was an important officer of the king, in charge of the palace guard. He soon found he had made a very wise purchase. Joseph worked well. He was able to plan and organize his work for himself, as well as obeying orders. He was honest and did not grumble or shirk his duties. Potiphar soon made Joseph his own special servant and began to leave more and more of the running of the household in Joseph's hands. God was with Joseph, even though he was far from his home and family. Joseph was probably as content in Potiphar's home as a slave can be. He was a trusted servant in an important man's household. But Joseph was soon in trouble again. Potiphar's wife had taken a liking to this handsome young man. Before long, she suggested to Joseph that they become romantically involved. Joseph, knowing this was wrong, would not listen to her. "My master trusts me with everything he has," Joseph told her. "How could I deceive him by taking his wife? That would be a sin against God, whom I love and serve." Potiphar's wife would not listen to Joseph's words. She followed him around, pleading with him. Joseph tried to keep out of her way, but one day she found him alone. When she put her arms around him, he turned and ran. Potiphar's wife was hurt and angry. She told her husband lies about Joseph and pretended that Joseph had been the one who had done wrong. Potiphar ordered Joseph to be taken off to prison. Joseph's feet were put in chains, and an iron collar was fixed around his neck. He was no longer the trusted slave. But God was with Joseph, even in the dark prison, God had not forgotten him. Poor Joseph. He's gone from being a slave to being somewhat trusted as a servant to being tossed in jail because of some lies told by Potiphar's wife. Well, let's see if Joseph can get himself out of this tricky situation. It was not long before the jailer in charge of the prison found out how helpful Joseph could be. He began to give him all kinds of little jobs to do, looking after other prisoners and arranging the prison routine. Whatever Joseph did was well done. One day a new prisoner arrived. He had been the king's wine steward, high in the king's service, but somehow he had displeased his royal master and been thrown into prison. The jailer gave Joseph the job of looking after him. One morning, Joseph noticed the steward was looking miserable. "What is the matter?" he asked kindly. "I had a dream last night, and I don't understand what it means." Like all Egyptians, the steward believed that every dream had a meaning, but in prison there was no one to explain them. "God can explain dreams," Joseph said. "Tell it to me." He listened, and God helped Joseph understand what the dream meant. "In 3 days' time," he told the steward, "you will be called by the king and given back your job." Everything happened just as Joseph had said. 3 days later, it was the king's birthday. He called the steward back into his royal service. When the wine steward had been in jail, Joseph had asked for his help. "Please don't forget me," he pleaded. "Tell the king that I have done no wrong and do not deserve to be in prison." Unfortunately, the moment the wine steward was back in the king's court, he forgot all about Joseph. 2 long years passed. Then one night, the king of Egypt had a dream that none of his special advisors could explain. In a flash, the steward remembered his own dream in prison and the wise, kind help that Joseph had given him. "I have been wrong," he told the king. "I had forgotten until this moment the young man who explained my dream to me in prison. He told me that I would be taken back into your service, and his words came true. Joseph could help you too." Orders were given, and servants rushed to the prison to bring out the astonished Joseph. He was hastily washed, shaved, and dressed in clean clothes. Then he was ushered into the king's presence. "I am told that you can explain dreams," the king said. "I cannot do so, Your Majesty," Joseph answered, "but God can." "In my dream," the king went on, "I saw 7 fat cows coming out of the river to feed on the grass. 7 thin, bony cows stood beside them. The thin cows ate up the fat ones. After that, I had another dream. I saw 7 full, ripe ears of grain, besides 7 thin, withered ears. The thin ones ate up the full ones. What can these dreams mean? God is telling you what is going to happen so that you can be prepared, Joseph explained. The 2 dreams mean the same thing. There are going to be 7 years of good crops when everyone has plenty, but 7 years of bad harvests will follow. Those 7 years of shortage will use up all the plenty of the good years. That is the meaning of your dreams. When the king of Egypt heard Joseph explain his dreams, he was horrified. He knew that 7 years of crop shortage would bring famine and death. But Joseph had something more to say. Your Majesty, may I suggest what you should do? Choose one of your men and put him in charge of all food supplies. He can supervise the storing of grain during the years of bumper crops so that there will be enough to feed everyone during the years when the crops fail. That way, the people won't starve. The king was pleased with Joseph and his wise advice. You shall be that man, he announced. You have shown how wise you are, so I shall put you in charge of everything that needs to be done in Egypt. You shall be my new governor. On the king's orders, Joseph was given a fine chariot, servants of his own, and rich clothes and jewels. He traveled the length and breadth of Egypt. In every city, he gave orders for huge storage buildings to be put up to hold grain. 7 years of wonderful harvests brought huge quantities of grain. It was stored all over the country, thanks to Joseph. Then, as predicted, came the lean and hungry years, when no crops would grow. Joseph busily worked, selling the grain and making sure that it was fairly distributed. Soon, people living in nearby countries, who were also hit by famine, learned that there was grain available in Egypt. These people came to Joseph to buy grain. Back in Canaan, Jacob and his sons were hungry too. I hear they have grain to sell in Egypt, Jacob told his sons. Go there and buy some for us. All the brothers set out, except for Benjamin. Jacob could not bear to be parted from him, for Benjamin was the only remaining child of Rachel, the wife he had loved so dearly. Well, As soon as Jacob's sons were ushered into the presence of Joseph, he recognized his brothers. But they had no idea who he was. They never expected their brother to be alive, much less to be the governor of all Egypt. Besides, he was dressed like an Egyptian. "Where do you come from?" Joseph asked sternly. He spoke in the Egyptian language, and a servant translated what he said. "From Canaan," they answered. "We have come to buy grain." "I don't believe what you say. Prove to me that you are not spies." We are honest men," the brothers protested. "Then tell me about yourselves," Joseph insisted. "There were 12 of us, all brothers," they began. "But one brother is dead, and the youngest is so dear to our father that he would not let him travel with us." Joseph felt strange when he heard himself described as dead, but he did not let his feelings show. "Prove to me that you are honest. Bring your youngest brother with you the next time you come. I will keep one of you here as hostage until you return with your proof." Simeon was taken and put into prison. The others were allowed to return to Canaan with sacks full of grain. The brothers knew they had to convince their father to allow them to return to Egypt with Benjamin. "Never!" Jacob cried. "Joseph is dead, Simeon is in prison, and now you want to take Benjamin away." Then Judah, the brother who had originally suggested they sell Joseph to the traders so many years before, spoke up. "I promise to be responsible for Benjamin," he vowed. Reluctantly, Jacob agreed, and all the brothers set out for Egypt. When they arrived back in Egypt, they were relieved when they were kindly welcomed to Joseph's house. When, after so long, Joseph saw his own brother Benjamin, he could hardly contain his tears of joy. He ordered that Simeon be released and invited them all to dinner. When they came in, nervously, to dinner, they were amazed to find that they had been seated in exact order of age. How could anyone have known? Also, Benjamin was served with extra large helpings of food. The brothers were so thankful and relieved that they were not being treated as spies. Soon, they were safely on their way back to Canaan with full bags of grain. As they happily headed toward Canaan, they were surprised to see a horseman in the distance, speeding towards them. With sinking hearts, they soon realized the man was a servant of the governor. "How dare you steal my master's best silver cup?" he shouted. "We don't know what you mean," they protested. "We have stolen nothing. If any one of us has the cup, you can put him to death and keep the rest of us as slaves." Roughly, the servant searched through each bag of grain. The last sack he opened was Benjamin's. There was the precious cup. The brothers were horror-struck. Silently, they followed the servant back to Joseph. They didn't realize that Joseph had planned this to find out what kind of people these men really were. When he heard the servant's report, Joseph pronounced, "The guilty man shall be my slave." Then Judah stepped bravely forward. "If you keep Benjamin, my father will die of grief. Please, keep me as your slave instead." Joseph could hardly believe his ears. His brothers were very different people now from the heartless gang they had been. Tears welled up in his eyes. He could not keep the truth from them any longer. "I am Joseph, your long-lost brother," he told them in their own language. The brothers were terrified when the truth sank in. The great governor of Egypt was none other than the brother they had treated so badly many years before. Surely he would make them pay for their awful behavior. But instead, Joseph told them to come close to him. He hugged and kissed them all. "Don't blame yourself for what you did," he said kindly. "God had a plan when he brought me here. I have been able to save many lives." Then there was laughter and talking and great excitement. "Now, hurry back to Canaan and fetch our father and your families. There are still 5 more years of famine to come. I will see that you are settled in Goshen, where the pasture will be good for your flocks." The brothers returned to Canaan, taking the news to Jacob that his son Joseph was still alive. And soon the whole family had packed up their belongings and moved to Egypt. Wow, even though Joseph's brothers had treated him horribly, the family is back together now. Joseph had to extend a little grace to those brothers to help the family reconcile. And now things are going to be pretty happy for the family there in the land of Goshen. Now, I've got a Saddleback Kids video for you to wrap things up. And in it, you'll find the answer to a question that's been bugging me. When the Israelites left Egypt following Moses many years later, why were they carrying a bag of Joseph's bones with them as they walked across the rough terrain? You'll find the answer at the end of this video. So, enjoy.
stories of the Bible. Joseph and the Promised Land.
This is Joseph,
Hey!
who's the son of Israel and Rachel. Joseph was the most loved of all his brothers, so his brothers hated him. After being sold into slavery and put in jail, Joseph found favor with the Pharaoh and ruled over all of Egypt. He helped Egypt thrive during 7 years of abundance, and then he was prepared for 7 years of famine because God had helped Joseph to understand the Pharaoh's dreams about what would happen to Egypt. Now, during this time, Joseph's brothers came to seek his help, and after testing them, Joseph told them who he was, and he forgave his brothers for all the trouble they had put him through. But Joseph had not seen his father for many years.
Hey!
So he sent for Israel and his brothers' families. Together they all traveled to the land of Egypt, where Joseph would provide for them in the famine. Pharaoh allowed Joseph and all his brothers to settle in one of the best parts of Egypt. And finally, Joseph was reunited with his father. Joseph lived 110 years and saw 3 generations of his family flourish in the land.
Hey!
Before Joseph died, he told his brothers of the future of Egypt. He told them of the exodus that would take place, meaning that they would all return to the promised land of their father Israel, his father Isaac, and his father Abraham. He made his brothers promise that when they left the land of Egypt, they would take his bones with them and bury them in the promised land. Joseph always lived with hope that God would deliver him and his people. Though many people meant to show him harm throughout his life, God meant it all for good, so that many people should live because of his faith.
Well, guys, thank you for joining me this week as we studied about Joseph. And come back next week when we'll learn about another Old Testament person whose name begins with J. Now, be sure to check out the crafts that Miss Chris and I have prepared to go along with this lesson. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.